That was awful. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Two Comic Book Dudes. I'm Aaron, editor-in-chief of Comic Booked.
Hey everybody, Justin, managing editor over at Comic Book.
And this week we've got a special guest with us, in spirit only, since we couldn't get the video to work. Jim Zub is joining us.
Hello, hello. Thank you so much for having me. I feel like this disconnected voice from afar here.
And right. So to remedy that, we're going to give everybody a picture of you to look at.
Oh my gosh.
So there's you with Skull-Kickers, a great series that you wrote. And we've got some other great stuff that we're reading currently, or I'm reading at least, Wayward and Figment, which Figment was, when it first came out, it was the first of the was it the second of the Disney Kingdom books? I think
second
it was.
Disney Kingdom series, yeah.
So I saw it and I had picked up Seekers of the Weird, and I really liked that. So I thought, well, I'll pick up Figment too, and I got the first issue, and then everybody's like, oh, did you see this? Did you pick this up? I'm like, no. And it was like, it's sold out all over the place. So,
yeah, it was crazy. It was it's been a ton of fun to be a part of. So yeah, real unexpected kind of burst of press and everything around the release of the first Figment series. It was awesome.
Yeah, well, it was a very different kind of story, which was neat. And I like that Disney was taking these ideas from either existing rides or rides that could have been, and then giving us more of a world around each of those. That was pretty cool. So, I mean, we can kind of talk about that. I know I gave you a list of questions ahead of time, but we'll jump into that if you don't mind talking about working in that realm of the Disney Kingdom stories.
Sure. No, it'd be my pleasure. I'm up for chatting about any of the different stuff that I've worked on. So Disney Kingdoms is a really unique opportunity, obviously. So when Disney purchased Marvel, there was a thought they weren't really going to cross the streams very much. That for the most part, obviously they're sharing assets and things like that. But in terms of the publishing, they were kind of two very different camps. And once they got a little more comfortable with the working relationship, they started to talk back and forth about how they could collaborate, not necessarily to tell other people, at the company what to do, but just how they could use, each other's properties to their advantage. And so a conversation came about between Joe Quesada, who at the time was the editor-in-chief of Marvel, and some of the people over at Disney, very casually at first, and then more pronounced later on, talking about ways to collaborate. And one of the things they struck upon was this idea that, Disney wanted to do Disney comics, but not necessarily just like Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck, the kind of what they've done previously with the Disney comic kind of properties. They wanted to sort of strike forth and build some new mythology, essentially. So you look at something like Pirates of the Caribbean, kind of a big deal, huge movie series, all built around the idea of the attraction. Well, at least in spirit, in terms of the name and whatnot. So they said, well, what if we sort of build these, I don't want to be crass, but like brands, what if we take these names of these different attractions and sort of build them out into storylines? And that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to make movies out of all of them, but to even just have the material there, to be able to sort of explore them and dig in and see what's there. And so the first one they did was this Seekers of the Weird, which is built around an idea that was supposed to be an extension of the Haunted Mansion.
Right.
And then that did okay, and they wanted to move forward with another one. And they decided, I believe it was David Gabriel, who's one of the VPs over there. He wanted to do something with Figment. He really liked the original Journey into Imagination attraction. And the Imagineers obviously really loved that attraction as well. And so they thought, oh, this will be really cool. And they decided they were going to use that one for the second one. Now, my editor, Bill Roseman, he didn't know the Journey into Imagination thing, but he knew there was a drag involved, Figment. Okay. And so he's like, oh, we need a fantasy writer, because he didn't quite know what it was about. And they were like, I was kind of on their radar anyways for things, and I've done a lot of sword and sorcery stuff. So he dropped me a line and asked me if I'd be interested. The funny part is he dropped me a line because he thought it was a fantasy thing, but my actual background is in animation. That was what I went to school for. It was classical animation. I've got a huge kind of background in that. And I actually teach an animation history course at an art college here in Toronto, Canada.
Oh, wow.
And so he picked right. He just didn't know it. kind of at the time. So I knew the Journey into Imagination stuff, and I knew a lot of the kind of background and lore that was there. And then they gave me a bunch of the design documentation, and I kind of dug in and came up with a take on it, based around the imagery and sort of the core ideas of the original attraction, but not necessarily. The original attraction doesn't really have much of a story, doesn't have a plot, doesn't really have character progression or those types of things. So we kind of developed this thing into the concept that would be the Figment miniseries, and really, thrilled that people responded to it so strongly. And for the most part, we kind of got to really build this thing and do something really unique with it.
Nice. So from as far as Disney's involvement in it, was it more just kind of like, here's the skeleton and you fill in the blanks, or did they kind of give you fairly good leash as far as letting you create what you wanted to do? Or
yeah, what was interesting about was they didn't have a set plot in mind. So they didn't say, okay, it's got to be like this. They were like, well, obviously we want it to be built around the concept of the attraction. But other than that, they were really kind of open to whatever, like they were looking for structure. They wanted me to really bring some structure to it. So it was about me kind of coming up with, what the whole thing would be. And it was in my best interest. I really wanted to make it as strong, and as tied to the original ride as I could. Yeah. And that was where my kind of focus was.
Okay.
But they didn't impose a lot of rules on it. Essentially, they were looking to me to provide that kind of structure. And so in the original pitch, I gave them sort of 3 different ways we could go with the story. And one of them was that concept of the origin of Dreamfinder and kind of the steampunk adventure. And that was the one that they really struck upon, that everyone liked. The Disney guys liked it, and the Marvel guys liked it. And so that was the one we ended up pursuing. Nice. And then a few of the sort of brainstorming ideas that we didn't end up using, I kind of, that ended up developing the story for Figment 2. So those kind of worked their way into it. Yeah. So if they do a Figment 3, I've got to come up with all new stuff.
But that kind of answers my other question. There is, did you find it hard to really do that sequel? Because you had such a solid, good story there at the beginning, and then they kind of disappear in the land of imagination, and then now, in the second series,
try and do it again. Yeah, right. It was unexpected, that's for sure. Most of everyone involved with it was stunned at the response that we got, and the multiple sellouts of all the issues and all that kind of stuff. The Disney fans really coming out of the woodwork for it. And so the sequel kind of came about very organically. It made some good ripples up the line at Disney, and people were talking about it, and the response is really strong to it. And then when the hardcover collected edition came out, they started selling it at the park. So they sell it at the gift shops and things like that. And it's doing extremely well there. And so they said, hey, you should do more of that. And so they came back and gave me kind of first crack to if I wanted to do more. And so I said, well, can we use some of these cool ideas that we never got around to on the first one and kind of build that outwards? And so luckily I had something already that I could work from, kind of build with. And we're hoping that, again, the collected edition does really well when it comes out in the spring. I think it comes out in April. And we'll see where it goes from there. But the Imagineers are really supportive, and they really enjoyed working with me, and vice versa. Okay. And our team was really great, and just a good response all around. I went to the D23 Expo, which is the big Disney convention in Anaheim. Yeah. And I got to do a presentation about the series there, and meet a lot of readers, and they were very enthusiastic. It was awesome. I got to sign with my team and stuff. It was just a real honor all around.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's a ton of fun.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, it's definitely a good series. And the second one I've really liked. I mean, it's a little darker. I mean, the first one had its dark points, but it seemed like you always had the Dreamfinder was always there, and he was always the happy-go-lucky kind of guy who was pushing through, and now he is kind of the bad guy. because
he's kind of lost his way, right? And
right.
so we wanted to up the ante. We wanted it to be more difficult. Obviously, you don't just want to do the same kind of thing again. And so looking at that idea of, I mean, the whole thing, the original attraction and the core concept of it as an, is the idea of creativity and imagination, right? It's a journey into imagination. And so I wanted to explore, well, what are the different aspects of creation? And one of them is, your own self-doubt, your own fears, your own kind of, the will to create, essentially, to do something that hasn't been done before. And that's kind of, something that we explored a little bit in the first one. And now we're kind of taking even further. But there's also this idea that's coming about in the second story that's also kind of the legacy of imagination. Like when you make something, you don't just make it in isolation. Other people are affected by it and what they see and what they do because of your ideas, And so this idea of this young girl, Capri, who is capricious, that's her full name, she kind of represents, this new generation of dreamer, someone who has been influenced by Dreamfinder and his inventions and his adventures. And now she, inadvertently is getting pulled into one of his adventures that she never imagined. He gets to meet Figment and all this sort of stuff. And it was just been a really fun way to kind of update the concept and bring it into the present day, but also kind of explore these story ideas. I think people get this idea when you're dealing with, and I hate to use the term, but like an all ages story or a story for kids, that it's got to be banal, that you just got to do the most base level thing with it. You know what I mean? And I don't feel that way at all. I feel like, trust your readership and do something that you're going to be proud of regardless. I'm not trying to talk down to anyone. I want to tell a good story, an adventurous story, and an exciting one, whatever age you might be,
Right.
Yeah, it's really good. I like the fact that you've got the Imagination College. What's it? It's
the Academy Scientifica Lucida.
Right. Yeah. So you have that's really very structured, very ordered, and it seems to be run by somebody who doesn't have a lot of imagination. Which, when you get into the whole idea of the bureaucracy running imagination, I thought that was kind of an interesting concept there for the college. And then you have this girl who's really in the same vein as the Dreamfinder, with the same abilities and the same, quote unquote craziness, right? She's always imagining something, always coming up with something like he was. And that's really what the school needs again, is that refreshment of imagination. So it's good. I'm looking forward to the last half of the series as that comes out.
Thanks. Yeah, I just finished proofing the final issue.
Oh, wow.
And so it's always interesting when you're working on these projects, particularly with the Disney stuff. I've got to be even further ahead. So I finished writing the ending like 2 to 3 months ago. And, while people are getting like issue 1, I was basically finishing the series. And so it's fascinating when I get feedback, because I'm just like, oh, you have no idea. You don't know what's coming. Like, it's kind of cool, right? And so, it's this weird sort of thing where you're always at different points of development. The same thing with my creator-owned series as well. Like, you're always thinking so much further ahead, or you've got to be in production so much further ahead. And you can lose track of, everything else that's going on in terms of the schedule. So you just got so much, to do. So, yeah.
Well, and that's got to be a challenge too, dealing with different series at the same time and the different deadlines for different things. I mean, Wayward is your big creator-owned series right now with Image. Right. And just a great story, very, very innovative. I felt when I first read it. I love the integration of the Japanese mythology into all of this. So
and it's a beaubeautiful book. It's just
I mean, Steve, my co-creator on Wayward and the line artist, he's incredibly skilled. And when you see the work he puts into every page, it's jaw dropping. I'll send him stuff and he just delivers the goods. He's amazing.
Yeah. And we have a background there with shot from the first issue, which I love the layout. I love the way it's, the perspective is so cool, and his detail is just amazing. So and
most of the locations in Wayward are real places. So that's something else I'm really proud of. The fact that, our Tokyo is, for the most part, like the real place. Like that your backdrop there is the east exit from Ikebukuro Station, and that's a real place. Like I've stayed in that neighborhood. I've been there. And so it's this cool thing where, I'll tell Steve ahead of time, okay, this is where, this is the scene coming up, or these are the things we're working on. And either I'll recommend or he'll recommend different places and neighborhoods or buildings that would work very well for that. And so then he would go out and shoot some photo reference, but he's not a slave to it. He's not tracing the stuff off. He's just using it as, okay, just want to make sure he knows the details and where it's all going to fit. And so, there are some, not every single building, obviously, but the key places and the core sort of scenes are all built around real locations.
Nice.
Yeah, and I think it helps ground, gives the supernatural story a bit more reality. So
yeah, for sure. It definitely, that's what I was going to say. It helps to tell the story. I mean, a lot of the times the writing is what keeps people in the story, but that art draws them initially.
Oh, sure.
And there's just such a great mesh between your writing and his art. I mean, it's just amazing.
Well, thank you. Well, and if your listeners haven't read Wayward, it's the core concept's relatively straightforward. So the way we kind of pitch it is almost like Buffy in Japan. So there's teenagers fighting Japanese mythological monsters on the streets of modern Tokyo. Yeah. So we take these teens who are going through those, awkward, difficult transitional years, and then we just put them through the dramatic meat grinder, and then have them fight awesome, freaky, traditional Japanese monsters updated for the modern world. And some of those original ideas, I mean, Japanese creatures, mythological creatures, are quite different than what people expect from sort of Eurocentric kind of mythology, and all of it's kind of grounded, like the European mythology. It's grounded in different sort of aspects of culture. So it's moral stories, they're little fables that say something about, behavior, or they say something about what people fear or things like that. And so being able to take those things and kind of inject them into a modern context and say, well, how would that work in a city? How would that work around technology or any of this kind of stuff? That's been a really fun kind of challenge to be able to play with. And then our kids have got, teens have got their own kind of supernatural powers. And I wanted to make them feel just as interesting and kind of different than, I didn't just want to do like superpowers. Like I didn't want them to be, okay, here's the kid that chucks fire or something. This one flies. Like I wanted to kind of really go off the wall and do something different with that. And obviously that's tough because everything feels like it's been done. So, how do we make those characters as interesting and their powers and their development as interesting and unique as we can? And so that was sort of the slowly developing that was a real challenge, but it was also a ton of fun. And being able to do it with someone like Steve, who's so incredibly skilled, has been just a real treat.
It's cool. I loved how each of their powers seems to be very grounded in who they are or what they're doing. Like with Rory, her whole thing is she's looking for a path in life in a way.
Right.
She was kind of lost. She felt it, when she was in Ireland and coming to Japan to be with her mom. She thought maybe this was a new way to start over, find her way in the world. And her power is that whole control of the ribbons of fate in a way, reality and finding the paths and being a weaver, which is just really, really cool because she was lost, but now she has the ability pretty much to find or shape anything.
Create structure, if you will. Yeah. Will focus into being and whatnot. Yeah, all of them. It's exactly that. So all of them, their powers kind of exemplify elements of themselves or elements of culture in terms of who they are, where their priorities are, or what. In some cases, also foreshadowing, what they will be as well. And so that's been a really cool process. And trying to throw people curveballs where, like, we didn't just want to have a team book where we said, okay, here's the team, and then they all come together and then they fight back. And so almost gleefully, we've kind of messed with that structure where they never quite pull together as a perfect team, or they never quite have their mission figured out, or the bad guys have kind of got, screwing them over at every turn. They, like any person, particularly a young person at that age, they don't know what they're doing. They don't have it all figured out. They're not organized. They don't, have their priorities straight, or in some cases even know what they're up against. And that's kind of part and parcel of the whole teen drama that we're building.
Yeah. Well, and then add to that the fact that Rory is so overpowered.
Mm-hmm. Too much of a good thing now.
Oh yeah.
And it's so funny because people send me letters and they're just like, she doesn't seem like a good guy anymore. And I'm like, well, dude, particularly went through the kind of traumatic things she's gone through.
Yeah.
She doesn't, she's lashing out. She's doing all sorts of things. She doesn't have, she has no structure right now.
Yeah.
And that's kind of something, again, playing against people's expectations, who she is, instead of just having a very simple kind of good guy, bad guy sort of motif. And I think we, particularly now in the third story, we're expanding even more so. So in issue 6, we kind of changed our focal point character from Rory, who seemed ostensibly to be the main character, to this other character, O'Hara, who we had shown in a cameo in the previous series, but no one knew she was going to be important. And showing, kind of contrasting her with Rory, how she looks at the world as more of a, for lack of a better term, traditional Japanese teenager, versus Rory as an outsider. And now in third arc, we're looking at a completely different perspective now. So the narrator is now, for lack of a better term, the villain, kind of giving you a different point of view on what has come forward. So
I thought that was really neat with 11 was that the head of the Tengu or whatever that was basically telling the story. I thought, well, that's definitely a shift, but that's really
cool. On a creator-owned book is where you want to take those kinds of risks. I feel like I want to do something unexpected with it.
Cool. All right. Well, I have a list of a ton of other things that you've done in the past that I've read or that we wanted to talk about.
Sure.
We can kind of go over a few of them, but you worked with Gail Simone on Conan Red Sonja crossover.
Yeah.
You want to talk about working with her and kind of how that came together?
Sure. I mean, Gail's a friend. I've known her for years. I worked at the Udon studio years ago. That was sort of my way into more of the traditional kind of comic circle. And so I had met her there back when the Udon studio was doing Deadpool and Agent X. But, when I started striking out on my own and doing my own creator-owned stuff, again, with Kickers, she read it, she liked it, she thought it was very funny, and she gave me a nice pull quote for the first issue and whatnot. And we stayed in touch. And so when the Conan Red Sonja opportunity came up and they talked to her about co-writing it with someone, she remembered that I'm a huge sword and sorcery nerd and that I love the Robert E. Howard stuff. And so she reached out to me and asked if I'd be interested in collaborating with her, which was amazing and intimidating, all at the same time. Like, this is one of my favorite literary characters ever. And, this is the brass ring for fantasy stuff, let alone the first time that these two characters were going to meet in, I think it was 16 years.
Yeah.
And we had to deliver something epic and memorable, one for the ages and all that. And I thought, oh man, like, here we go. This is some intense stuff. But it was a wonderful challenge. And so we basically both got to make a wish list of awesome sword and sorcery crazy crap that we've always wanted to do. And then find a story structure that could fit as much of it as possible into a 4-issue miniseries. So we both just did a wish list. It was like, well, we got to have some sort of a gladiatorial arena. Okay. Yeah. Well, we got to have a bar brawl. Well, we got to have, wouldn't it be great if they were on the high seas? Wouldn't it be great if, just throwing all the big set piece kind of moments. And Gail quite brilliantly suggested, because my big worry was, what era of these characters do you do? Do you do the young, impetuous Conan? Do you do King Conan? Do you do Conan in his prime, or Conan the pirate, or the swashbuckler? All these different eras of the character, and they're all iconic in their own way.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, this might be the only time they ever get to write Conan. Like, what's the right choice?
Do them all.
And Gail quite brilliant. Yeah, Gail said, let's not choose. Let's do a story that spans time. So they're able to, something they did when they're young comes back to haunt them when they're older. Yeah. And I was like, we get to play with all the toys. So, that was the best. That structure really pulled it all together, and that gave us a framework to sort of put it all in there and make it feel, even though it just jammed with stuff, it doesn't feel overburdened because it all plays into this story. And she had that concept, and then I took all the bits that we brainstormed and built the core plot and the pacing for the 4 issues. And then we went back and forth and structured it, and it sure all worked. Got approval from the Robert E. Howard crew and whatnot. And then we did a really interesting thing with the scripting. So we did, I guess the nickname for it is like tennis match. So we would each do, like I would do 5 pages of scripting, and then I would send it to her, and she would do the next 5, and then I would do the next 5. And so we're just doing this kind of handoff of each section, and then we would sort of do all of us would come back and edit dialogue or small adjustments based on the needs of the plot or feedback that we got for approvals and whatnot. So it was a really cool opportunity because I got to really see firsthand how she scripts and builds her dramatic scenes and vice versa, how I do action or let's put a joke in here or all kinds of different stuff. It was a really neat opportunity for both of us. Cool. To be able to really build something. Probably the funniest early on, the first sections that we did, I realized that she didn't put sound effects in, and I did. So all of a sudden we had this weird thing where my sequences all had like swords clash sounding and stab noises, and hers were dead silent. I was like, well, we got to fix that one. But yeah, it was a really neat challenge, and getting Dan Panosian is like one of my favorite artists to draw. I mean, again, just brain busting, just this awesome opportunity to be able to contribute to this thing. So it was great, and real milestone for me.
Awesome. Okay, well, Justin, you want to talk about Samurai Jack?
Yeah, we were just gonna try to get your thoughts on the recent news about since you had done Samurai Jack and a great run on that, what you thought about it coming back to TV.
Well, I mean, obviously it's a dream come true. I mean, absolutely love the series and was honored to contribute to the comic, creating some new stories, working with Andy Suriano, who was one of the main character designers on the original show, and we've got to kind of run wild because at that time when we were in the comic, it was not a defunct property, but it wasn't one that was active at Cartoon Network. So there was a lot more freedom there. Like Gandhi and Cartoon Network had to approve everything, but there was never this sort of impending sense of, oh man, got to be careful. So we kind of ran wild. And really, it was in kind of the spirit of the show. Like Andy and I would talk about this, and he said most of the episodes were just kind of people at the studio brainstorming cool stuff. Like, someone coming in, one of the board and being like, hey, I had this neat idea. We should do a story about that. And Andy would be like, that's cool. And they would just do it, Nice. And if you look at the show, the episodic format really works for that. Some of the shows tonally are very serious, almost philosophical. And some of them are just goofy, bizarre. They kind of can hold all of it. Like it's this genre melting pot where you have a fantasy, sci-fi, martial arts, comedy, philosophical, story. And it all kind of holds together and feels like Jack as the container and kind of work with it. You can have these really poignant episodes, and you can have other ones that are just full on slapstick, and it never does feel like Samurai Jack. And so we felt the same kind of thing when we were, building the comic, and to hear that they're bringing back Joe now with a full season. I mean, that's amazing. That's just the best feeling. Do
you feel you helped with that? You helped get it back on TV?
I don't know. There's part of me that would love to take a big bite of credit, but I don't think that that's realistic.
Yeah.
Andy always wanted to do more stuff with it, and it's just been about timing and budget and approval and all that sort of stuff. And so I can't comment. I think it's definitely the interest of the fact that both Gendy and Cartoon and fans really thoroughly enjoyed and felt like we're a worthy, continuation. That's the best feeling, honestly. So,
right.
Whether or not those get turned into animation, whether or not Gendy goes in a completely different direction, that's not up to me, obviously, and it's not something that I can really worry about. It's more about, hey, we did something cool, and I can't wait to see the show. As a viewer, as a fan, I really want it to be awesome. I want it to just keep that amazing story going, because I think, and especially now, I have so much more appreciation for the characters, for the just fantastic visual style, and I feel like the show was ahead of its time. The longer it goes, the longer it got in the rearview mirror, the more I think people realized how innovative it was in terms of design, in terms of pacing, in terms of the quality of the cinematography. And I use that, really, it didn't look like anything else on television, and it never aspired to be a kids show. It always aspired for something more visual. It was like epic, combat and epic visuals and this sweeping feeling.
Well, and the stories were so good that it has replayability. You can go back and rewatch it and still enjoy it.
Yeah, even when you've seen one before and you watch it again, you're kind of in awe, and it doesn't even have the it's done on standard resolution television, and yet it feels huge.
Mm-hmm.
They play with the aspect ratio, and they play with the frame, and they work with all these incredible feelings of distance. They play with sound, and they play with music, and they play with your expectations in terms of motion. It really was an incredibly innovative show. And so now that people, I think, appreciate that, and they're able to dig in and hopefully take it even further and say, okay, there's no limits. Like, let's see how far we can take this. I want to see, high definition, widescreen Samurai Jack. That's what that's what I'm stoked for.
That's pretty cool.
The day they announced it was insane, because Gendy is notoriously absent from social media.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't do a ton of interviews. He's not that kind of creator. And so when you looked up the hashtag Samurai Jack, which was trending globally, my Twitter account was the one that came up that said, follow this. And so I got hundreds of messages that day, from people asking me about it, and asking me if I was involved, and asking me how long I'd known, and, like all the, and I didn't have those answers, of course. It was pretty bizarre, but fun too, at the same time. So, and really hopeful. And I sent a message over to Andy, of course, and Phil Lamar, who's the voice actor of Jack, who's become a friend now. And it was cool. Everyone's really pumped. It's quite, from what I do know, it's quite early in the process, so I can't put a number on when the show's going to come out or anything, but it's not going to be super soon. Like, it's not early 2016 from everything I'm hearing. So it sounds like they're just getting rolling now. So
okay, cool. Oh, I think we've kind of talked about a lot of the questions in our discussion so far. So, and I know, even when we talked about the Conan Red Sonja, I was going to say, well, what's your dream character, or somebody that you really like to write? But you already said Conan, so.
Well, Conan, yeah. I mean, of characters I haven't written before, so I love Doctor Strange. Like, growing up, I was a huge Marvel kid, and so Doctor Strange, sword and sorcery and superheroes, well, he must be the coolest guy. And so I really liked him. And I like Thor and stuff like that. But yeah, Doctor Strange would be pretty sweet. And normally that character is kind of off the radar, but of course, now there's a movie coming out. He's he's the mainstream now, so my timing could not be worse. But that's fine. Jason Aaron has a slightly bigger audience than I do, understandably. So yeah, I have no idea when or if that'll ever happen. I mean, I've written,
but he has a series, so that's a good sign, though. You might.
Oh yeah, no, it's
it,
it is. I'd rather have the character popular and everywhere. That's for sure.
Right.
I wrote some backup story for the comic based around the old Spider-Man cartoon, and so as soon as they told me I could use a character that was in the show, and Doctor Strange was in the show, so I was like, well, okay. So I have written him sort of, like I wrote him in these, this short story, but it's not something. Yeah, it's not like as a leader. And same thing with Spider-Man. I would love to write Spider-Man on this. Oh, big. Dan Slott well, he's using but yeah, those are two characters that are quite near to me that I would love to do something with. I've got some kooky ideas for like the Warriors 3 and like stuff like that, and Blade.
Oh, wow.
Kind of characters off the radar. Weirdly enough, I would love to take a weird sideways turn and try and do something with Power Pack.
Interesting.
Yeah, which you're like, really, Power Pack? But I believe it or not, I think there's some neat stuff you could explore there. So the Marvel Universe is a really amazing place, and I would love to dig in on some of the weird, funky corners of that stuff at some point. But that being said, my focal point really, my creator-owned stuff and kind of working on those things, building stuff, that's all mine as a whole. I think that's always going to be my, the core of what I'm doing.
Yeah, and that makes sense. So, okay, Justin, you want to ask our last question?
Yeah, sure. All right, Jim. What was the comic that got you into comics, or what was the book where you finally realized this may be something I want to do?
Well, got into comics as a kid was like the G.I. Joe comic, so that's not really, I started reading that. Whenever they would end an episode of the G.I. Joe cartoon, the early ones was actually show a little thing after the logo. They'd have the Hasbro logo, and then they'd say like, buy the Marvel comic. And I was like, yes, master. And then I just go out and I will follow your lead, television. Tell me what I'm supposed to be. And so I would go out and I bought the books, and I really liked them. And the great thing was guys like Larry Hama were not, again, they weren't talking down to the audience. They were, the G.I. Joe comic was kind of a little violent, a little crazy, and it was really wild stuff. And I ate it up. I really liked it. And that, through those, I ended up getting sort of into the rest of the Marvel Universe. So through that, I started collecting Spider-Man, and my brother and I both started getting really obsessed with superhero stuff. So we were buying, almost like splitting the Marvel Universe in twain. Like we were going to buy as many of the books as we could, right? So Joe was collecting all the mutant books, and then I was collecting like everything, like Captain America and Avengers, and I would buy some Fantastic Four, and like we just tried to get all of it we could get our mitts on. And we got the official handbook of the Marvel Universe, and then we just got obsessed. Because when you're like 11 or 12, I think you see the same kind of thing nowadays with video games or with like Pokemon or things like that. Like you find a kid that they can't learn the multiplication tables, but they can tell you the name of every Pokemon because it's meaningful.
Right.
They have memory. It's just not for the things you wish that they had the memory for. And we were like that with the Marvel Universe. We were just like obsessed with it. We knew everything. We could test each other on characters' code name, first appearances, all sorts of psycho stuff like that. Because it was something that we could pour ourselves into. But I still didn't think of it as something that I would have as a job. Like growing up, all I knew was that you live in New York City doing comic books or be British. You either had to be Alan Moore or you had, I don't know why that worked that way, but that was the way the industry seemed to be, as far as I could tell. And it kind of, I didn't fall out of comics, and just, as usual, you just get distracted with other things going on in your life. Right. And by the time I got into high school, my brother had gone off to university, and while he was there, he met an engineering student at his university that were from Japan, and they were taking this engineering course in Canada, a highly regarded school here, and they brought their comics and their cartoons with them. And so my brother was kind of, in one of the first anime clubs.
Oh, wow.
Like around. And so he brought all this stuff home to show me. And I was like, what the hell is this? Like, these cartoons are crazy and violent and weird and amazing.
This is awesome.
This stuff's insane. We saw Appleseed, and we were like, this is like a cyberpunk sci-fi crazy violent animation. What the hell? And so we started to get obsessed with anime, and that kind of became a real touchstone for me in high school. I was like, it sounds awkward, I was like the dealer. Like I had all these, anime tapes, VHS tapes I was lending out to people. I had a little lending library going, getting people hooked on all these
VHS tapes.
Yeah.
That's what I still have. I still have like Ninja Scroll and Ghost in the Shell.
Yeah,
VHS.
Fan subtitled, but these were like being put together by university students, dubbing a Japanese Laserdisc through an Amiga. Some really, really primitive stuff.
Nice.
But it was amazing, and we felt like we were just doing something, watching stuff no one else knew about. It was really cool.
Yeah.
And then it started to get more and more mainstream, as Akira came out, and then eventually Ghost in the Shell and all that sort of stuff, and you were just like, oh, this is a thing now.
Yeah.
Like, this is, people are into this. Cool, and kind of weird. But if you would have told me, hey, someday there's going to be like unflipped manga, and they're going to have their own bookshelf at a mainstream bookstores, and just humanly possible.
Right.
But, so that was sort of an amazing thing that I got into in high school. Anyways, you asked how I got into comics. This is going to be one epic. No, my apologies here.
No, you're good.
But animation was always kind of a thing for me. Both kind of Disney style stuff or Looney Tunes, but also anime. And so I really wanted to get into the animation industry. Also because that felt like an industry I could actually get a job in. Because you look at film and there's hundreds of names in the credits. I was like, I could be one of hundreds of names.
Yeah.
Instead of, I could be the one person on the front cover of a comic book. Like, that just seems not possible. Yeah. And so I really focused on animation. I went to school for classical, traditional style animation. And hilariously, the whole kind of computer animation sea change was happening as I was learning to draw hand-drawn animation. So I left school just in time to miss sort of the digital revolution.
Oh, wow.
And was a dinosaur in my time almost immediately, which was really sad. Like, I didn't even learn Photoshop until I taught myself, when I got out of school kind of thing. Yeah, sad. On the wrong side of the divide there, but oh well. Worked in Canadian animation for a few years, and then I was originally going to go back to school to learn 3D animation, and a friend of mine who I'd worked with for a year or two, he was working at the Udon studio, so he was working with those guys, and they were coloring comics for Marvel, and they were doing artwork on a few of the Marvel titles, and so he dropped me a line, because he heard I was back in town. We chatted about comics. I had comics. I was literally I did a for a little self as like a time.
Hang on just a minute, Jim. I think we're getting a little bit of feedback from your side, maybe.
No.
Yeah, real choppy. Justin, are you hearing that as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh.
It should be okay. We're here now,
Does
Jim.
it sound all right now?
Yeah, now it's okay. Yeah. I don't know. We've just had a couple of sections in the show so far where we've had a little bit of that, and I just didn't want to lose too much of what you were saying.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Like I had done a webcomic kind of for fun, and I'd even gone to a couple comic conventions to talk to people about webcomic stuff, but I still didn't kind of see a way to make it a job. Do you know what I mean? Like I could make a comic, but I didn't see like I'm going to be gainfully employed doing it.
Right.
And it was a really cool experience, but it wasn't until I got to the studio and I started working there that I really learned about how the publishing industry worked and how kind of things under the hood happen in terms of comics.
Okay.
And that eventually gave me the confidence to want to do another sort of creator-owned project in what became Skull-Kickers, and the things I learned about art and, storytelling and even things like project management, how to keep this thing on schedule, and how to market it, and all kind of into launching my own book, with Skull-Kickers. And so it's weird because when I look at the meandering kind of creative path, it makes sense, but in the moment, it's always this kind of tumultuous, what am I doing? Oh, I guess it's going well.
How did I get here?
But every time I talk to someone in comics, it always feels like that. Everything makes sense in retrospect. You look back and go, and that's where I learned how to do this, and that's why that paid off, or that's where I met that person who would become really crucial to my career. But at the time, we were just, hanging out and whatever. Yeah, well, I feel like part of comics is obviously the work, and part of it is also just like, almost like just being around, like just being in the community and being a dirty shirt, just being there, because people say, it's the right place at the right time. And that's true, but you also have to create those contact points of places and times. And so if you're going to conventions and you're meeting people and you're building up your own work, then that's where you're going to really find those commonalities that turn into, projects.
Yeah. And I feel the same way with our website. It's all about the relationships we build with the creators, with the actors and actresses,
absolutely,
everybody. I mean, anybody that we communicate with, and the way we both present them to the world and present ourselves to the world. So yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, and I think it's something too where, people say to me, oh my God, I can't believe you worked on Samurai Jack or things like that. And, writing Samurai Jack was never like on my bucket list because I never thought that would ever be possible. Like it just wasn't something that was even on my radar. Right. But once it happened, I was like, well, this is a really good fit for my kind of sensibilities or the types of stories I write. And it feels inevitable in retrospect, but it wasn't. It just, it worked out because of other work that I'd done that people had seen that they said, hey, I think Jim would be a good fit for this,
Very cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think we've gone about an hour.
Keep you long enough.
That's right.
Yeah.
But we do appreciate you taking the time to talk with us about everything. I mean, it's been great to get to know you, to get to know your background and all the different projects that you're working on. We really appreciate that.
Well, thank you. No problem. If your listeners want to find out more about what I'm doing, my website is real simple. It's jimzub.com. So JIMZUB.com. And there's the typical kind of links to buy stuff and interviews and previews and whatnot. But there's also tutorials on there. So about how I write comics, how scripts are formatted, and some samples of pitches. So you can see the originals that I sent to Image when they picked up Skull-Kickers or things like that. So if people want to get a look sort of under the hood of how comics work, they can see some cool stuff there.
Okay, cool. We'll make sure to put a link in the description of this video and in the article that'll go from the site.
Yep. Sure. Yeah, I love that kind of stuff. The tutorials, those are very helpful. But I know a couple, I think it was last year or year before for, Top Cow does their talent search every year. And my wife and I were talking about working together to do a script. And I'm like, I have no idea how to write a comic script. So I went out there and searched, and I know your website was one of the ones I looked at to figure out how to write a script. So we didn't actually submit anything, but we did the first couple pages, so it was the first step. But yeah,
that's great. No, and it's all, that's where it starts. You got to build the stuff bit by bit. So very cool. Thank you.
All right. So again, Jim Zub joined us tonight, and we really appreciate that. You can check him out at jimzub.com as his website. He's got Wayward on the shelves right now. Wayward 11 just came out last week or week before.
Mm-hmm.
So a new story arc just kicked off with that from Image, and that's a great book. Also, Figment 2 is also on the shelves. Third issue just came out. I think we're looking forward to fourth issue maybe next week. So
yeah, I think next week.
Okay, and you're still working on Munchkin as well, right?
No, I just did some backup stories for Munchkin. I'm doing backup stories for the new Street Fighter comic series for Udon.
Oh, right.
So that launches this week. I don't know when your podcast will go up, but that launches this week.
Awesome.
And yeah, it's been a ton of fun to dig in on that.
That's cool. Actually, I got the Street Fighter, the Loot Crate exclusive one from Udon. So it had a cool cover on it. Yeah, really neat.
Nice.
So, yep. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I'll have to see if our shop's carrying that or not. I'll pick that up when it comes out. So,
awesome.
All right.
Well, thank you for the support.
Sure. Yep. Sure. All right. So everybody out there, thank you for watching. Appreciate you taking the time. Definitely like, share, subscribe. Leave us some comments if you got some burning questions for Jim. Go ahead and post them in here. We'll make sure he gets them. If you want to send them directly to him, you can go to Twitter and follow him and send him messages and stalk him all over social media. So.
That's right.
All right. Well, Jim, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it.
No problem. My pleasure.
Okay. All right. Thanks. We'll talk to you later.
Sweet. Take care now.
Have a good one.